God's chosen one. Yes, you who have heard the whisper behind your thoughts, you who've been pacing the same spiritual room, waiting for a sign that was already screaming through your bones. Let this be clear. This is not encouragement. This is a command, not from me, from heaven, from the fire that's been waiting behind every sleepless night, every missed opportunity, every ache you've buried beneath convenience and distraction. The time is over. The waiting is done. You either move now, or you begin to die. Not in body, but in fire, in spirit, in soul. This isn't poetry, this is prophecy. You have been marked not for ease, not for applause, but for rupture. You were never called to walk the earth softly. You were sent here as a divine rupture, a storm, wrapped in sacred silence, a voice that wasn't born to echo, but to shatter. And now heaven is watching. Not because you're being tested, but because you've already been chosen. And chosen ones don't wait. They respond. So why are you still standing at the edge of obedience, as if God didn't already hand you the blueprint? Why? Are you still pretending to be unsure when your whole body has been trembling with instruction? Why are you asking for signs when the ache in your soul has already spoken louder than thunder? You know, you've always known. Even when you tried to forget, even when you shrank, even when you agreed with the fear just to buy yourself more time. But time is the one thing you don't have. You're not early. You're not late. You're right at the edge. But edges break, and if you don't leap, the weight of the not yet will pull you into a silence that no prayer will reach. Do it or die. Not because God is cruel, but because purpose delayed too long begins to decompose, and the rot doesn't start outside. It starts in your ribs, in your discernment, in your desire. You stop craving the mountain, you settle for dust, you forget how to roar. You weren't sent here for that. You were sent here to be a crack in the system, to be the interruption in generational patterns, to be the answer to cries that came long before your name existed. And now you stand at the altar of everything you asked for, not someday, now. But you can't receive what you're unwilling to become. God's not waiting to give it, He's waiting for you to become it. And that means letting the old die, not ease into silence, but burn. You cannot carry both your calling and your comfort. One has to fall. You're not exhausted because you're weak. You're exhausted because you've been dragging old weight into spaces that demand wings. You're still trying to fly while hugging the anchors He already asked you to drop. How long will you negotiate with what's already cursed? How long will you sing over tomb shopping the dead will love you back? The season you're waiting for won't come until the one you're clinging to finally ends. And that end doesn't come through time. It comes through fire. So burn it. The plan, the excuse, the fantasy, the version of you that was built to be acceptable, not anointed. That version is not welcome where you're going. There's a sound your life was meant to release, and it doesn't match the noise you've been repeating. The ground beneath you is groaning. Your spirit is ready. But your grip on the familiar is holding back the flood. Let go. You say, but I'm scared. Good. Obedience was never about comfort. It's always been about courage. The kind of courage that walks into the unknown with nothing but a whisper in your chest and fire in your bones. That's the kind of courage that parts seas. That's the kind of courage that builds legacies. And right now, your legacy is waiting, not in the distance, but on the other side of this decision. So I'll ask you plainly, will you do what you were sent here to do, or will you let it die with you still breathing? Because breath alone is not life. Obedience is. You can have lungs full of air and still be a ghost if you're living beneath your calling. And some of you already are. You're walking, you're smiling, you're surviving, but you're not alive. Because life, real life, only happens in the place where surrender meets fire. That's where purpose lives. That's where miracles rise. And that's where you're being called. Has it ever occurred to you that this message isn't just reaching you? It's requiring something from you? This isn't just a video. It's a summons. You're not here to be entertained. You're here because heaven is watching to see what you'll do next, so let your presence be known. Comment, "I'm stepping in," if you feel it too, and subscribe now, not for more content, but for more confirmation. Because this space wasn't built for passive scrolling, it was built for radical alignment. This is your moment. Don't just feel it, respond. The fire is moving. Will you move with it? Not tomorrow. Now, chosen one, the call didn't come to comfort you. It came to interrupt you. You weren't sent here to adjust. You were sent here to ignite. And that means everything that kept you numb, everything that lulled you into compliance, everything that whispered, "Just stay small," has now become a threat to your survival. Because spiritual survival isn't about stillness. It's about movement. It's about waking up before the earth does, about seeing the war before the world admits it's burning. And you saw it. You've always seen it. The cracks in the system, the silence in their eyes, the hollowness in the noise. That's why you don't belong. That's why you ache. Not because something is wrong with you, but because something is very right. You were built to disrupt, to challenge, to break patterns that generations accepted without question. But before you can confront the world, you have to confront the part of you that still wants to be liked, that still wants to be normal, that still wants peace without purpose. Let it die. Let the version of you that tried to survive in shallow places drown completely. Because resurrection only happens when the old self stays buried. You've been reborn for battle, not for applause, not for explanation, for execution. And no, it won't feel natural. That's the point. Because what's divine rarely feels safe to what's flesh. So if you're trembling, good. That means the Spirit has touched you. That means heaven has sent its flame to a soul that was done pretending. And now it begins. No retreat. No rehearsing, just raw obedience, radical surrender, immediate fire. Let the shaking come. Let the breaking come, because what's being born in you is too holy to fit inside the life you had before. God's chosen one. You didn't imagine it. That war inside you, that constant tug between who you are and who you're pretending to be, it's real. The pressure you feel in the middle of the night, the way you can't get comfortable in spaces that once felt like home, the way silence no longer soothes you but exposes you. None of it is coincidence. You're not cursed, you're being called out. There comes a moment when the soul refuses to be buried beneath excuses, when the ache gets too loud, when compromise begins to taste like poison, when the version of you built for acceptance begins to crack under the weight of destiny. This is that moment. This is that cracking. You don't need confirmation anymore. You need combustion. You need a break in the illusion. You need something to split you open so the real can rise, and it's happening. But not how you expected, not with applause, not with ease, not with a crown, but with fire, with pressure, with pain. Because the next version of you doesn't emerge through strategy, it's born through surrender. You've tried to think your way into breakthrough. You've tried to fast your way into transformation. You've tried to wait your way into movement. But nothing moves until you do. God is not waiting on your plan. He's waiting on your obedience. He's waiting on the moment you stop hiding behind preparation and start stepping in with nothing but a trembling yes. You say, "I don't feel ready." Of course you don't. Readiness is a myth. It's a trap wrapped in logic. It sounds wise but smells like fear. God doesn't call the ready. He calls the willing, and the willing aren't always certain. They're just convicted enough to move. You feel that conviction. It's what's been haunting you, not guilt calling, not shame awakening. The reason you can't shake this message is because it's not just a message, it's your mirror. You're looking at yourself, raw, unfiltered, unmasked, and you know the truth. You were not created for the slow death of disobedience. You were not built to shrink. You were born to disrupt, to shake ground, to speak what others only think. to carry a voltage that unplugs darkness. And you've been quiet long enough. You've been polite long enough. You've been reasonable long enough. But God didn't call you to be reasonable. He called you to be radical, to be ruinous, to systems, to lies, to fear. So why are you still negotiating? Why are you still explaining away the very thing you were anointed to release? You know it's time. You feel it in your bones, but you're scared of the fire. You're scared it will cost too much. Here's the truth. It will. It will cost everything that wasn't supposed to survive anyway. It will cost your need to be liked. It will cost your reputation with people who only knew the old version of you. It will cost your comfort, your timing, your fantasy of a painless becoming. But what you gain, unshakable identity, spiritual clarity, alignment with divine motion, and the kind of power hell cannot counterfeit. That is the trade, and that trade must happen now. You say, but what if I lose them? You already did, the moment you outgrew their comfort zones. You say, but what if they don't understand? They won't. They were never meant to. You say, but what if I fail? You already are. Every second you stay where your fire no longer fits. This isn't a threat. This is truth. You don't need to understand the outcome. You need to honor the voice, the one that keeps waking you up, the one that ruins your peace when you settle for less, the one that whispers, even now, you were made for more. So why are you still pretending to be less? Every day you delay, you teach your soul that fear wins. Every time you stay, you silence the thunder you were born to speak. God did not call you to echo. He called you to break sound barriers. There are people waiting for your obedience, not your comfort, not your logic, your obedience. Because when you move, you don't just move for you. You create a pathway for others. Your yes shatters spiritual ceilings. Your motion breaks chains you've never even seen. Your obedience prophesies freedom to those watching in silence. Do you realize the weight of that? Your fire is not private. It is public prophecy. It is divine declaration. It is heaven's interruption in earth's stagnation, but only if you let it burn. So what's still standing in the way? What lie have you still not confronted? What agreement have you still not cancelled? What comfort have you still not renounced? You don't need therapy. You need truth. You don't need another plan. You need permission, and heaven already gave it. You are not bound by their timeline. You are not held by their opinions. You are not late. You are simply on the edge. And the edge is where the chosen are tested. Don't step back. Don't retreat. Don't romanticize the prison just because it's familiar. The wilderness is not punishment. It's purification. It's where oil is pressed, where altars are built, where voices are stripped of ego and filled with fire. You have felt the heat for a reason. It is not madness. It is alignment. You are being prepared, not for safety, but for impact. And the world is waiting. God is watching. The heavens are holding their breath. Because everything now hinges on one thing: will. You do it, chosen one. You feel better now, don't you? Not good. Not alive, but quiet. That's the trap. You've mistaken the numbness for peace. You've called the silence inside you rest, when in truth, it is the sound of your soul being sedated. That's not peace. That's what it feels like when destiny starts to suffocate under delay. That's what it feels like when you begin to normalize absence. God hasn't left, but you've become comfortable enough with distance to stop chasing closeness. And that's the most dangerous place a chosen one can be, not in pain, but in passivity. Pain stirs movement, but comfort sings you to sleep. And if you stay asleep long enough, you'll forget you were ever meant to burn. You'll forget what urgency felt like. You'll stop hearing the whisper in the dark. You'll stop shaking when the spirit moves. You'll stop craving what you once cried for. This is the death the enemy loves most. Not loud, but quiet. Not rebellion, but routine. Not hatred, but numbness. Because the numb can't hear God. The numb don't act. The numb don't roar. And that's the real cost of staying where God asked you to leave. You're not okay. You're asleep in the spirit while pretending to be strong in the flesh. You're praying prayers you don't believe in anymore. You're quoting verses you no longer feel. You're showing up in rooms that your fire left long ago. And heaven is watching, not in judgment, but in ache. You were so close, so awake, so ready, and then the lie crept in. Maybe I don't have to go that far. Maybe I can obey partially. Maybe I can soften the edges of what God asked for. But there is no almost obedience. There is no lukewarm surrender. There is no partial calling. You're either burning or you're dimming. And right now, you know you're dimming. Everything feels not quite right, but you can't name it. You keep saying something's off, but you don't fix it, because fixing it would require fire, it would require severing, it would require loss, and you don't want to lose again. But here's what you've forgotten. What you refuse to lose now will soon become what costs you everything later. You can't carry this version of you into the next dimension. The weight is too holy, the fire is too pure, and if you try, you will collapse under the contradiction. You say, I'm not sure I'm still chosen. But you wouldn't feel this tension if you weren't. This ache, this spiritual nausea you can't explain. That's what it feels like when calling and compromise try to share the same soul. It doesn't work. It wasn't meant to. You weren't born to carry both glory and garbage. So what are you still holding? That voice, that vow, that fear, that toxic agreement with who you used to be? Why is it still in your mouth? Why is it still in your room? Why is it still in your bloodstream? You've been marked, branded, summoned. You don't get to pretend you're normal anymore. You don't get to casually exist. You carry too much. You know too much. You've seen too much. You have been activated, and activated people cannot survive in sedated places. So rise, not with fanfare, not with applause, but with fire. Let your cry offend the atmosphere. Let your surrender ruin your reputation. Let your obedience make others uncomfortable. Because obedience doesn't make sense until the miracle is complete. And the miracle is waiting on movement. This world will tell you to calm down, to be realistic, to wait. But God is not asking you to be polite. He is asking you to be holy, and holiness demands distinction. It demands sacrifice. It demands severance. You are not losing anything worth keeping. You are shedding what was never assigned to your next season. So don't cry over the cost. Cry over what it's already cost you to delay. You've already wept over lost clarity. You've already bled for ignoring your gut. You've already wasted time trying to make broken things divine. But now is the moment of reversal. Now is when your yes must get expensive again. Now is when your prayer must become posture. Now is when your decision must burn every escape route. Because if you still have a plan B, you haven't really said yes to plan A. Chosen one, you don't need a new word. You need a clean break. You need to shut the door you keep cracking open. You need to delete what you keep revisiting. You need to cut the rope that keeps pulling you back to the shore when you were built to walk on waves. And no, it won't be comfortable, it won't be easy, but obedience isn't easy. It's everything, and everything must go if everything is what you've been asking for. Heaven is not impressed by your performance. It is activated by your posture. By the blood in your yes, by the shaking in your feet that still move anyway, by the willingness to be misunderstood for the sake of alignment. This is the season of severance. This is the moment of movement, and this is the hour where you don't just wake up, you rise. Chosen one, you're not numb because you healed. You're numb because you buried the wound without ever letting God touch it. You didn't overcome. You escaped. You ran from the pain and called it peace. You silenced your questions and called it surrender. But God doesn't want your silence. He wants your sound. The sound of the broken, the raw, shaking cry of the chosen who finally dares to feel again. Because the enemy's plan wasn't just to hurt you, it was to convince you that feeling again would kill you. But what if feeling again is what sets you free? What if the fire doesn't return until the tears do? What if the numbness isn't protection, but poison? And what if you've been surviving on spiritual anesthesia when heaven was waiting to operate? This isn't healing. It's hiding, and you weren't called to hide. You were called to burn. The anointing doesn't live in avoidance. It lives in exposure, in confrontation, in surrender that costs more than silence. So let yourself feel again. Let the ache return. Let the void speak. Let the Spirit shake what you tried to stabilize. You're not too late. You're just in the middle, and God still moves in the middle. Even when you feel far, you're not forgotten. Even when the flame is dim, it's not dead. But it will stay dim if you keep pretending you're fine. You don't need a better mask. You need holy defibrillation, a spiritual shock back into awareness, a violent grace that won't let you die while calling it peace. So cry again, shake again, break again, if that's what it takes to burn again. Because God isn't finished. He never was. You just stopped moving when the numbness convinced you to stand still, but you were born for motion, for friction, for glory that comes after the ripping. So rip it, tear the veil you've sewn with silence, expose the ache, let the roar through, and when you do, you'll find God never left. He just refused to shout over the lies you believed. Chosen one, you need to hear this without a filter. You're not going to survive what's coming if you stay small. Not because God is punishing you, but because your current size is too fragile for the weight of your own purpose. You keep trying to shrink, so you won't offend, so you'll be accepted, so you don't lose the people who only knew the quiet version of you. But God didn't choose you to blend in. He called you to break ground, and ground never breaks gently. You've mistaken harmony for holiness. You've confused approval with anointing, and that confusion is costing you your fire. You say, but I don't want to be too much. But you already are. You are too much for dead systems, too much for lukewarm spaces, too much for the shallow waters that once felt safe. You've outgrown the disguise. The spiritual costume no longer fits, and now heaven is pressing you to do what you've avoided the most. Be seen, not the version of you that they approve, not the shadow that smiles and stays silent, the you that was sent, not manufactured, the you that carries thunder, the you that doesn't flinch when truth trembles a room. But here's the thing, being seen comes with risk, and that's why you've been hiding. You've convinced yourself that obscurity is humility, but sometimes obscurity is just fear in disguise. You've called it preparation, but heaven calls it delay. You've said, it's not time yet, but God already released the clock. You've said, what if they misunderstand me? But you were never meant to be understood. You were meant to shift atmospheres. Chosen one, your silence is not protecting you. It's suffocating you. You don't need another word. You need to roar. You need to release what's been growing inside you, like fire in a cage. And yes, it will offend, because obedience always confronts what comfort tries to protect, because glory always exposes what tradition tries to hide. They won't clap for this version of you. They'll question it, they'll resist it. They'll try to pull you back into the costume just to make their own stagnation feel justified. But don't go back. Don't shrink. Don't explain your fire to people who were never lit. This next season is not optional. It is ordained. You're not invited to step into it. You're summoned. And that summons doesn't come with conditions. It comes with fire. It comes with separation. It comes with surrender. It comes with a weight that you can't carry, while also clinging to everyone else's approval. Let it go. Let them go. Some people can't go with you, not because they're evil, but because their presence would dilute your power. You can't afford dilution now. You can't afford distraction. You can't afford disobedience disguised as diplomacy. Heaven is too loud. The timing is too sharp. The cost is too eternal. You must move, and move loudly. Move decisively. Move without apologizing for what heaven has already confirmed. This isn't arrogance, it's alignment. And alignment requires that you let the roar out. Not the gentle yes, not the half-hearted amen. The roar. The one that breaks contracts you didn't know you signed, the one that shakes foundations built on fear, the one that signals to every silent watcher that you're no longer asleep, and when you release it, hell will notice. But so will heaven, and heaven is backing you. That's what you forgot. You're not moving alone. You're moving with momentum. You're moving with mandate. You're moving with the wind of glory behind your spine. You've delayed long enough. You've edited your obedience long enough. You've downplayed your fire long enough, but long enough is over. This is not the hour of hints. This is the hour of heavenly havoc. Let the world feel what your obedience unleashes. Let them feel the shift. Let them feel the silence break. Let them feel the spiritual earthquake that your yes was always going to bring. You're not here to survive. You're here to shake systems. You're not here to be liked. You're here to leave marks in the invisible world. And you won't do that playing small. The calling on your life doesn't fit in quiet corners. It doesn't shrink to keep the peace. It doesn't smile just to make people comfortable. It disrupts. It ignites. It divides. Not because you're cruel, but because light always splits darkness. So let them whisper, let them question, let them distance themselves. You were never called to fit in. You were called to be set apart. And the fire that's been building in your bones has waited long enough. Now is the time to unleash it, not with apology, but with holy confidence. God isn't asking if you feel ready. He's asking if you'll say yes, even trembling, even bleeding, even breaking. Because it's not about how strong you are. It's about how surrendered you are. And right now, surrender sounds like movement. So move. Let the roar out, walk in fire and never shrink again. Chosen one, you were never safe in the shadows. You only felt unseen, but the enemy saw you the moment you were marked. And that's why the pressure increased, not because you failed, but because your fire terrified darkness long before you believed you had any. So stop saying, "I'm not ready." Stop pretending invisibility is holiness. It's not. It's delay, dressed in spiritual language. You've baptized your hesitation in false humility. You've made fear sound like wisdom. But heaven isn't fooled. Heaven is waiting. And while you wait to feel confident, real warfare is happening in rooms your name echoes through. Every time you shrink, you forfeit territory. Every time you pause, you delay deliverance, not just for you, but for those attached to your obedience. Yes, others are tied to your yes, and when you sit in silence, their freedom stalls. That's not poetic, it's divine law, because the oil isn't for vanity, it's for victory. The anointing you carry was never meant to be admired, it was meant to destroy yokes. But it can't destroy anything while you stay seated in safety. You keep saying, "What if I go too far?" But the real danger is that you'll never go far enough. There's no such thing as too much when you were born to shake systems. There's no such thing as too loud when your roar carries freedom codes. So stop adjusting your volume to fit inside rooms you were born to remake. You weren't called to echo. You were called to initiate. And initiators never wait for permission. They walk into the middle of silence and set it on fire. So now the question remains, will you shrink again? Will you rehearse the same excuses? Or will you finally realize that heaven already called you forward and hell already heard your name? There's no middle ground now. No room for neutrality, no safety in silence. This is holy war, and you are the weapon. But a weapon must be wielded, not admired, not dusted off for display, not stored away for more mature seasons. You are in season now. This is your activation. So don't wait for confirmation. You've already been commissioned. Don't beg for alignment. You are the alignment, and don't ask for another sign. Your very breath is the signal. So rise fully, publicly, unapologetically. You were not sent to decorate the battlefield. You were sent to conquer it. Chosen one, don't panic. This silence you're in, it's not punishment, it's prophecy. You asked for elevation. You prayed for clarity. You begged God to use you, and now it feels like everyone is gone. No support. No confirmation, no cheerleaders, no audience. Good. You were never meant to become what you are in the presence of applause. You were meant to be forged in isolation. Before the breakthrough, God strips the room, not to break you, but to build you in. Private so that when you rise, you don't rise addicted to validation. If you still need a crowd to move, you're not ready for the kind of glory he's about to place on you. This season, this silence, it's on purpose, because divine power cannot rest on divided identity. And so he removes the mirrors, the comparisons, the noise, so you can hear him. It doesn't feel fair, it doesn't feel holy, it just feels lonely. But loneliness is where oil is made, where assignment becomes obsession, where fear is starved and faith gets loud. You are not being punished, you are being prepared. God hides his greatest weapons before he reveals them, not to torture them, but to shield them from premature exposure. Because if you rise before you're ready, the weight will crush you. So he isolates, he separates, he removes what you were leaning on. And all you're left with is obedience. No plan, no clear end, no comforting voice in the hallway, just your trembling yes, and that is enough. Heaven doesn't need your performance. It needs your position, your posture in the quiet, your worship in the void. Your surrender when there's no reward in sight. That's what activates the supernatural. Not the crowd, not the claps, not the platform, but the cry that comes from the back room. And chosen one, you're in the back room right now. You think you've been forgotten, but you've actually been marked. You think you're abandoned, but you've been sealed. God doesn't go quiet to punish. He goes quiet to test, because what you do in the silence reveals what you actually believe. Anyone can shout in the spotlight. But do you still believe when heaven is silent? Do you still obey when the oil feels dry? Do you still worship when the blessing hasn't landed? That's where true obedience lives. You're not losing, you're being refined, you're not invisible. You're being hidden on purpose, because what he's building in you would be destroyed by premature visibility, and the kind of anointing on your life cannot survive on borrowed faith. So he cuts, he strips, he silences, until you stop moving for man and start burning for him alone. This is not cruelty, this is covenant. And yes, it hurts to be unseen, unheard, uncelebrated. But heaven never needed the world's agreement to unleash its chosen. And you don't need theirs either. You just need to last, to endure the silence without switching lanes, to walk through the fog without demanding a sign, to hold the line when your hands are shaking. This is the proving ground. This is the press. And this is where the fire either dies or becomes unquenchable. You're not weak for crying. You're not broken for aching. You're just becoming the kind of vessel that doesn't leak when the pressure builds. Becoming the kind of warrior that doesn't need a sword to bring fear to hell. Becoming the kind of voice that echoes across generations. But only if you endure the silence, the stripping, the severance. Don't curse the quiet. Don't run from the space that feels empty, because it's not empty. It's sacred. It's the place where heaven rewires your mind, rebuilds your rhythm, and resurrects the parts of you that were never supposed to die. And when it's done, when the room opens, you won't walk out the same. You'll walk out flaming, and everything that tried to kill you'll realize too late that the silence didn't destroy you, it resurrected you. Chosen one, there is no more time. This is the part of the story where waiting becomes disobedience. You've asked, when will the door open? But the truth is, it already did. You're not locked out, you're just afraid to step through, and heaven has been waiting, not to punish, but to launch. Because the next season doesn't come with comfort. It comes with collision. Your old self will collide with your future. Your fear will collide with your faith. Your name will collide with your assignment. And only one will win. This is the moment when the false versions of you must die permanently. No resurrection. No sentimental last look. Burn the costume. Delete the plan B. Sever the secret ties, because the gate has opened. And delay is no longer spiritual. It is disobedience. God is not repeating himself again. This is the final call. This is the departure. This is the sound of destiny screaming, now, you've said. But what if I lose everything? And heaven replies, what if you do? If it wasn't meant for you, it can't sustain the weight of your future. If they can't walk with fire, they were never assigned to your flame. Let it go. The fear, the smallness, the fantasy version of your calling that let you stay soft and safe. You weren't built for soft and safe. You were built for shaking mountains. So now move. Move even if your knees knock. Move even if your heart screams. Move even if you feel nothing, because obedience doesn't wait to feel ready. It just moves. That's the test. Will you act on a word that your emotions haven't caught up with yet? Will you leap before your legs believe? Chosen one, you've healed long enough. You've waited long enough. You've cried long enough. Now it's time to build. This is the phase where pain becomes blueprint, where grief becomes strategy, where tears become currency in the kingdom of heaven. Every betrayal was a foundation. Every rejection was a nail. Every silence was mortar for what you're about to construct. But construction requires movement. It requires noise. It requires sweat and faith and risk. It requires walking away from what you once begged God to let you keep. Because now you know what looked like loss was actually liberation. You thought he was ignoring you, but he was inviting you into a realm where faith moves faster than logic. So say yes. Loud, unfiltered, expensive. Not the cute yes, the bleeding yes, the one that costs everything. Because only that kind of yes unlocks what eyes have not seen. Only that kind of yes cracks the sky. Only that kind of yes will prove to the watchers in the dark that you were not bluffing. They laughed, they watched, they whispered, "She'll go back." They muttered, "He's not built for this." And they were wrong. You were always chosen. You were just hidden, but now you emerge, not humble, holy, not apologizing, authorized, not cautious, commissioned. And when you move, hell won't laugh. It'll shudder because it remembers the prophecy. It remembers your name written in fire. It remembers the contracts that broke when you finally said yes without editing it. So go. Break the silence. Shatter the delay. Stomp the hesitation under your feet. And build. Build what hasn't been seen. Build what hasn't been done. Build what they said could never happen again. And when it rises, don't take credit. Let it burn in glory, not to prove your worth, but to reveal his fingerprints. You are the evidence, not of perfection, but of resurrection, not of popularity, but of power. You are what happens when obedience refuses to stay quiet. So don't go back, don't explain, don't shrink, don't stall. There's nothing left behind you that belongs to your future. Heaven is open, the trumpet has sounded, and the next time your feet touch the ground, you will shake it. Move not with fear, but with fire, not with doubt, but with destiny, not with apology, but with authority, because this time you're not walking in as a question mark. You're walking in as the answer. Chosen one, this earth was never your ceiling. It was your launch pad. You weren't made to settle. You were crafted to ascend, and that means standing still was never the plan. Every second you hesitate, you insult the preparation. Every time you ask for one more confirmation, you question the God who already equipped you. But God isn't interested in your comfort. He's committed to your combustion. You weren't chosen to glow. You were chosen to ignite. So let the fire catch. Let it consume everything that tethered you to stillness. Let it scorch the scripts you rehearsed in fear. Because you don't need better conditions. You need movement. The atmosphere won't shift until you step. The doors won't open until you walk toward them. The angels won't release until your obedience goes active. You're not waiting on God. He's waiting on you, and he's not waiting with crossed arms. He's waiting with open gates. You have clearance, you have code, you have confirmation burned into your bones. So move, even if it feels foolish, even if no one understands, even if the outcome isn't clear. Because clarity comes after obedience, not before it. And courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to walk through fire while fear begs you to turn back. You're already burning. Now it's time to run with it. There's a sound assigned to your motion, a chain that will only break when your feet hit the ground. So don't stay grounded, don't wait for applause, don't bow to second thoughts. This is your hour, not someday, not after the storm. Now.